no. I'm overdue. I'm really in a stew. No time to say goodbye. Hello, I'm late.
Dateline, Los Angeles, California. Pop star Bobby Sherman has Disneyland in his own backyard. Whether it's winning the lottery or being a movie star, everyone has a favorite fantasy. For many, the ultimate dream is having Disneyland as their own personal playground. Well, for successful actor and former teenage heartthrob Bobby Sherman, fantasy became reality.
Originally, what I was going to do was build my boys a treehouse, but they were rather young, and I kept having these nightmares that I've been falling out. So I said, well, I'll try something else. I'll build a Western street. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, well, even if it's brand new, it's to be authentic looking, it's going to look old and beat up. So I decided, I know, I'll build the first 2 blocks of Main Street Disneyland. So I do a lot of work with the Disney organization. I happened to make a call, and they said, well, sure, we'll help you out. So they sent the elevations to the first 2 blocks of Main Street Disneyland, and thinking it was going to take 3 months, 2.5 years later of hard labor, I finished the first 2 blocks of Main Street Disneyland, plus or minus quarter-inch accurate in every detail.
Sherman's remarkable tribute to Disneyland's Grand Avenue is all the more impressive knowing that he built the entire street with his own 2 hands, without any outside help.
The most difficult things that I'd encountered was really with wood that had to be round, trying to make things, in arch kind of shapes and all that. And that either I was trying to steam wood, get it wet and let it sit and bend it, and that, break things right and left. It was very frustrating. Then I realized I could go to metal and it still looked just fine. So I'd use flashing, different kinds of metals, plastic, and I was able to, get exactly the same look.
What began as a simple 3-month project grew into a 2.5-year labor of love, built to an exact 1/5 scale. Without a reference, it is impossible to distinguish this miniature Main Street from the original.
This being the tallest building of the Emporium is 10.5 feet high here. At the park, it's about 54 feet, something like that. So the integrity is pretty close, plus or minus quarter-inch accurate in every detail. For instance, these corbels are comprised of about 12 pieces, and there's 46 of them. So after a while, when you're working on 46 corbels, 12 pieces, it takes a lot out of you. I do think the Emporium certainly was the most difficult building. It was the largest. It had the most detail. It had the most different kinds of mental exercises to say, oh, how am I going to do that? And I think that was the one that kept me up most at nights, trying to figure out what I was going to do the next day to make the thing look right.
From the street lamps to the window frames, Sherman's attention to detail has been meticulously precise.
For instance, this is exterior plywood, but I hand routed each brick with a router, so it looks and feels just like brick. I just sprayed gray to make it look like the mortar, and then rolled a color on it, so it has the feel and the look just like brick. The street lamps themselves are kind of a piecemeal kind of thing, so I use a lot of different materials. For instance, this is just an upside down piece of glass that's screwed into a base, which is actually electrical. This is a separate piece just cut out of metal, and this was basically a leg to a table that I used, and I cut them all down and added different things to make it look exactly like the lamps at the park.
Bobby Sherman has even composed and arranged Main Street music to make this fantasy world come alive.
Shall we dance?
Although it may seem like an arduous task to many, the construction of a miniature Disneyland Main Street provided a welcome diversion and therapeutic relief from the grueling show business schedule of Sherman's teen idol days.
I found that when I would go into the workshop and start working on this, that it really it gave me some insight to myself. I was actually finding myself talking to myself, but learning more about how I felt, how I thought about things. So it did turn out to be quite therapeutic.
Young and old alike have admired Bobby Sherman's handiwork, but perhaps the greatest compliment on his achievement came from a visit by Walt Disney's daughter.
First thing she said was my father would have fallen in love with it, because he was a big miniature buff, and I hadn't realized it at the time, but it stood to reason that, he had worked with miniatures and had done a lot of that work. And that kind of made the whole project worthwhile, to know that Walt would have gotten a kick out of it.
But one doesn't become as successful as Bobby Sherman by resting on his laurels.
Well, it'll do until I start the castle next week down the street.